The locomotive's whistle pierced through the autumn afternoon like a mournful cry, its black smoke billowing against the vast Wyoming sky. Clara Evans pressed her face against the window, watching the endless prairie roll by in waves of golden grass and scattered sagebrush. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the worn letter in her lap, the one that had brought her 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to this wild, untamed land. Asterisk, October 15, 1887. Dear Miss Evans, your photograph has brought light to my humble home. My daughter and I eagerly await your arrival at Cedar Ridge Station. The territory is rough, but I promise you a good life and honest work. Yours respectfully, William Morrison. Clara read the words again, though she'd memorized them weeks ago. William Morrison, a widowed rancher seeking a mother for his child and a companion for himself. It wasn't the romantic beginning she'd dreamed of as a girl, but dreams were luxury items she could no longer afford. Not after father's business failed. Not after the creditors came calling. Not after mother suggested she consider other arrangements. With Mr. Blackwood, their landlord, who was old enough to be her grandfather. The train lurched suddenly, throwing Clara against the hard wooden seat. Through the dust-covered window, she glimpsed a ramshackle station approaching weathered boards barely holding together against the relentless wind. A faded sign swung precariously from a single chain, but she couldn't make out the letters through the grime. Willow Creek Station, the conductor bellowed, moving through the car. All passengers for Willow Creek. This is your stop. Clara's heart hammered. She checked the letter again. Cedar Ridge, not Willow Creek. She had studied the map carefully. Cedar Ridge was supposed to be 2 stops further west, but the conductor was already at her row, his thick mustache twitching impatiently. Miss, are you disembarking or not? We've got a schedule to keep. I'm sorry, but I believe my destination is Cedar Ridge, not Cedar Ridge. The conductor scratched his balding head, consulting a crumpled paper from his vest pocket. Tracks washed out past Willow Creek. Been that way for 3 days now. Flash flood took out the bridge. Won't nobody be getting to Cedar Ridge by rail for at least another week. Maybe 2. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. But I'm expected. There must be some mistake. No mistake. Miss, the notice was posted at every station from Denver to Cheyenne. His expression softened slightly at her obvious distress. Look, there's usually someone in town heading that direction. Willow Creek's not much, but it's better than sitting on this train all the way back to Denver. The whistle shrieked again, urgent and demanding. Other passengers pushed past her, eager to stretch their legs or continue their journeys. Clara's mind raced. She had exactly $17 to her name, not enough for a week's lodging. Certainly not enough for a return ticket. William Morrison would be waiting at Cedar Ridge, wondering why his bride hadn't arrived. Would he think she'd changed her mind? Would he find another woman? Miss, I need an answer. Clara stood on unsteady legs, gathering her carpet bag and the small trunk that contained everything she owned in the world. I'll disembark here. The platform was even more desolate than it had appeared from the train. Wind whipped at her traveling dress, sending dust devils spinning across the warped boards. A few buildings huddled together down what might generously be called Main Street. A general store, a saloon, what looked like a boarding house with crooked shutters. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow, as the train pulled away with a final, melancholy whistle. Clara had never felt more alone. She stood there, carpetbag in hand, watching her only connection to civilization disappear into the horizon. The few other passengers who disembarked had already scattered, leaving her with just the wind for company. Papa, she's here. The voice was high and sweet, cutting through Clara's despair like sunshine through storm clouds. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, came running down the platform, her calico dress flying behind her like wings. Her hair was the color of wheat, braided but coming loose. And her eyes, Clara had never seen such blue eyes, like pieces of sky fallen to earth. Before Clara could react, the child threw her arms around Clara's waist, burying her face in the folds of her traveling dress.
"Papa, God finally answered us,"
the girl whispered, her voice muffled by fabric but clear as a bell.
"He sent her. He really sent her."
Clara stood frozen, her hands hovering uncertainly above the child's head.
"I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I think you've mistaken me for Emily Grace Carter. What in the name of—"
The man's voice stopped mid-sentence. Clara looked up to see him standing at the edge of the platform, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. He was tall, broader in the shoulders than any man from Philadelphia, with hands that spoke of hard work and a face weathered by sun and wind. Dark hair curled from beneath his worn hat, and his eyes, gray like storm clouds, stared at her with an expression caught between confusion and something else she couldn't name. "Emily, come here," he said quietly, but the child only tightened her grip on Clara.
"No, Papa, this is her. This is the lady you've been waiting for, the one you write letters to late at night when you think I'm sleeping."
Heat flooded Clara's cheeks.
"Sir, I apologize. There's been a misunderstanding. I was supposed to travel to Cedar Ridge, but the tracks are washed out, and
"You're from the matrimonial agency." The man said. It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, roughened like leather left too long in the sun.
Yes, but not for here. Not for Willow Creek.
I'm engaged to marry Mr. William Morrison at Cedar Ridge." Something shifted in his expression, disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed habitual. "Samuel Carter, Miss, and this barnacle attached to your middle is my daughter, Emily."
"Papa,"
Emily protested, finally releasing Clara to turn reproachful eyes on her father.
"Don't you see? She got off at our station. Not Cedar Ridge. Our station. Just like I prayed for."
"Emily, we've talked about this. The agency said it might be months before—"
"But she's here now."
Emily grabbed Clara's hand, her small fingers surprisingly strong.
"What's your name?"
"Clara. Clara Evans."
"That's a pretty name."
"Prettier than the last governess. She smelled like sour milk and made me copy Bible verses until my fingers hurt." Emily tugged at Clara's hand.
"Come see our wagon. Papa painted it blue because blue's my favorite color, but the paint's peeling now because of the dust storms." "Emily Grace."
Samuel's voice carried a warning. "Miss Evans has her own plans. She's not—" "The hotel burned down last month," Emily announced cheerfully, ignoring her father. "And Mrs. Garrison, who runs the boarding house, doesn't like children, so she probably won't let you stay there if she thinks you might bring me around to visit. And the saloon's no place for a lady. Papa says so all the time." Clara looked between the child and her father, seeing the truth in their faces. Willow Creek was even smaller than she'd thought, with limited options for a stranded traveler. Samuel Carter stood stiffly, clearly mortified by his daughter's behavior but unable to deny her words.
"I couldn't impose," Clara said weakly.
"It's not imposing if I'm inviting you," Emily declared with the confidence only a child could muster.
"Papa,
Tell her about the extra room.
the one that's been empty since—"
She stopped abruptly, her brightness dimming for just a moment.
"The one that's been empty for a long time."
Samuel cleared his throat, and Clara could see the internal war playing across his features. Pride versus practicality. Propriety versus the pleading eyes of his daughter. "Finally," he sighed, settling his hat back on his head. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. You're welcome to stay until you can arrange transportation to Cedar Ridge. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe." He paused, then added quietly, "Emily's right about the lodging situation in town. Martha Garrison is, particular about her clientele." Clara knew she should refuse. Every rule of proper society demanded she find other arrangements, no matter how uncomfortable. A single woman didn't stay at the home of a widowed man, not without causing the kind of talk that could ruin reputations. But she was 2,000 miles from anyone who might care about her reputation, with $17 to her name and nowhere else to go. That's very kind of you, Mr. Carter. I promise I won't be a burden. Perhaps I can help with household duties in exchange for—
You can teach me to read better, Emily interrupted. And how to sew. Papa tries, but his fingers are too big for the needle. And last time he mended my dress, it looked like a flour sack.
Emily, Samuel groaned, but Clara caught the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips.
I'd be happy to help,
Clara said, and meant it. Whatever strange circumstances had brought her to Willow Creek instead of Cedar Ridge, this child's enthusiasm was the first warm thing she'd encountered since leaving Philadelphia. Samuel nodded curtly and turned toward the street. I'll get your trunk. As he walked away,
Emily squeezed Clara's hand again, her voice dropping to that same reverent whisper. I knew you'd come. I told Papa that God wouldn't forget about us. He just takes his time sometimes. Like with the wheat growing. You have to wait, and just when you think nothing's going to happen, suddenly everything's golden.
Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she simply squeezed back, following this strange little girl and her stoic father toward a wagon that was, indeed, painted blue beneath layers of prairie dust. As Samuel loaded her trunk, she caught him watching her with those storm cloud eyes, something unreadable in their depths. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow, and Clara pulled her shawl tighter, somewhere beyond those mountains. William Morrison was waiting for a bride who would never arrive, but here in Willow Creek, a little girl's prayer had apparently been answered, even if Clara was the wrong answer to the wrong question. As the wagon rolled away from town, Emily chattering happily about everything from her favorite hen to the proper way to make flapjacks, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't gotten off at the wrong station after all. The Carter Ranch sprawled across the prairie like a defiant statement against the wilderness. As the wagon crested the final hill, Clara caught her first glimpse of what would be her temporary refuge, a modest 2-story house with a wraparound porch, weathered to silver gray by countless seasons. A barn stood sturdy against the October wind, and beyond it, cattle dotted the landscape like scattered seeds.
There it is,
Emily announced proudly.
Home. Papa built the porch himself after we needed more space for sitting and thinking.
Samuel remained silent, his hands steady on the reins as they descended toward the homestead. Clara noticed how his jaw tightened at his daughter's words, the way his knuckles whitened just slightly. Whatever memories this place held, they weren't all pleasant ones. The house's interior was exactly what Clara had expected, yet nothing like it at all. Clean, yes, and orderly in the way only a house without a woman's touch could be functional but stark. The furniture was handmade, solid pieces that would last generations. But there were gaps, empty spaces where Clara could almost see the ghosts of whatever had been removed. No curtains on the windows, no tablecloth on the dining table, no cushions on the chairs. It was as if someone had stripped away all softness from the space. I'll show you the room, Samuel said, setting down her trunk with the same careful precision he seemed to apply to everything. Emily, go check on the chickens. But Papa. Now, Emily Grace. The child scurried off, but not before throwing Clara a conspiratorial grin. Samuel led the way upstairs, his boots heavy on the worn steps. He paused at a door at the end of the hall, his hand resting on the knob for a moment before pushing it open. The room was small but clean, with a single window overlooking the endless prairie, a bed with a faded quilt, a washstand, a small wardrobe, everything necessary, and nothing more. But what caught Clara's attention was what wasn't there. No dust, in a house where 2 bachelors lived. This room was suspiciously well maintained, as if someone had been preparing it, waiting. This will do, Samuel asked. And for the first time since they'd met, he sounded uncertain. It's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I truly don't know what I would have done. Sam, he interrupted, then seemed surprised at himself. Everyone calls me Sam, except Emily when she's being formal, which isn't often. He shifted his weight, filling the doorframe like he didn't quite know whether to stay or go. Supper's at 6, nothing fancy. Emily wasn't wrong about my cooking, but it's filling. I'd be happy to help with the meal. It's the least I can do. He studied her for a long moment, and Clara felt herself being weighed and measured. You ever cook over a wood stove? No, she admitted, but I'm a quick learner. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. We'll see about that. The stove's got a temperament worse than a bronc in spring. Takes a certain touch. He left her then, his footsteps retreating down the hall. Clara sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. Through the window, she could see Emily in the yard, scattering feed for chickens that followed her like devoted subjects. The girl moved with the unconscious grace of someone born to this life, comfortable with the space and silence in a way Clara couldn't imagine being. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Emily peeked around the door, her blue eyes bright with curiosity. Papa says I'm not to bother you, but I thought you might like to know where things are. The privy's out back, and we keep the wash basin filled from the well. Papa built a real nice washroom downstairs too, with a big tub for Saturday baths. That's very helpful. Thank you. Emily stepped fully into the room, her expression growing serious. Can I tell you a secret? Clara nodded, charmed despite herself by the child's earnestness. Papa's been writing to the matrimonial agency for months. He thinks I don't know, but I do. I can read better than he thinks. She moved closer, lowering her voice. He gets sad sometimes, especially at night. He sits on the porch and stares at the stars like he's looking for something. I think he's lonely. Emily, I don't think your father would want you sharing. He won't send for anyone, though keeps finding reasons why each lady wouldn't suit. Too delicate for ranch life, too set in city ways, too this, too that. Emily's eyes sparkled with mischief. But he can't send you back. You're already here. Clara felt her cheeks warm. Sweetheart, I'm engaged to another man. I'm only staying until... The bridge is out for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 if the rains come early. That's a long time. Emily tilted her head, studying Clara with uncomfortable intensity. You're pretty. Not like the pictures in Papa's magazines, but real pretty. And you didn't faint when you saw our house, which is better than the last lady who visited. Another mail-order bride. No, the banker's wife from town. She came out to discuss Papa's loan and spent the whole time holding her handkerchief to her nose like we smelled bad. Emily's face darkened at the memory. We don't smell bad. Papa makes us bathe every Saturday whether we need it or not. Clara bit back a smile. I'm sure you smell just fine. Will you come see my room? I have a collection of pretty rocks and a bird nest I found after it fell from the cottonwood. Papa says I can't keep live animals in the house anymore after the incident with the prairie dog, but I can keep things that don't move. The tour of Emily's room revealed a space bursting with personality drawings tacked to every wall, treasures lined up on the windowsill, books stacked precariously on a handmade shelf. It was the only room in the house that felt truly lived in, truly loved. Supper was indeed at 6. And it was indeed filling, if not fancy. Sam had made something he called cowboy stew, chunks of beef with potatoes and whatever vegetables had survived in the root cellar. They ate at the kitchen table, the silence broken only by Emily's chatter about her day. Papa, did you know Clara can speak French? She told me in the wagon. Say something in French. Clara. Clara obliged with a simple phrase, earning a delighted clap from Emily and a raised eyebrow from Sam. What's that mean? Emily demanded. The sky is blue like your eyes, Clara translated, making the girl giggle. Fancy education, Sam observed, not quite making it a question. My mother insisted. She said a lady should be accomplished, even if she'd never have occasion to use it. Clara pushed a piece of potato around her plate. I suppose she was right about the never using it part. Education's never wasted, Sam said firmly. Emily here's going to have proper schooling. Soon as the town builds that schoolhouse they keep promising. I could help with lessons in the meantime, Clara offered without thinking, then caught herself. That is, for the few days I'm here. Emily bounced in her seat. Would you really? Papa tries, but he gets frustrated with the grammar book. Last week he told it to Emily. Sam's voice carried that warning tone again, but his eyes held warmth. What have I told you about repeating things you overhear? Only repeat the things that won't get me in trouble, Emily recited dutifully, then grinned. But you said a lot of words that would get me in trouble. Despite himself, Sam chuckled, and the sound transformed his face. Clara realized with a start that he couldn't be much older than 35, maybe younger. The hard life out here aged people. Carved lines that belonged to older faces. After supper, Clara insisted on helping with dishes. Sam protested, but eventually gave in, showing her the peculiarities of the kitchen pump and the correct way to heat water on the temperamental stove. They worked in companionable silence, Emily drying dishes with more enthusiasm than skill. You don't have to do this, Sam said quietly, watching Clara scrub a pot with determined efficiency. You're a guest. I'm not comfortable being idle, Clara replied, and I meant what I said about earning my keep. Most ladies would be demanding to be taken to town, raising a fuss about the situation. Clara's hand stilled in the soapy water. I'm not most ladies. Mr. Carter, Sam. If I were, I wouldn't be out here in the first place. He nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. They were both running from something, or toward something, maybe both. Later, as darkness settled over the prairie like a blanket, Clara found herself on the porch despite the chill. The stars were different here, brighter, closer, more numerous than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia. She could hear Sam inside, reading to Emily from what sounded like an adventure story, his deep voice gentle with patience as Emily interrupted with questions. This wasn't her life. In 2 weeks, maybe 3, she'd continue to Cedar Ridge and marry William Morrison, a man she'd never met. She'd honor the agreement she'd made, build the life she'd promised in her letters. This was just an interlude, a pause in her journey. But as she listened to Emily's laughter drift through the window, watched the vast sky wheel overhead, Clara felt something she hadn't expected. Not homesickness for Philadelphia or anxiety about her future in Cedar Ridge. Instead, she felt a strange sense of possibility, as if the universe had conspired with a little girl's prayers to bring her exactly where she needed to be, even if it wasn't where she was supposed to go. Inside, Sam's voice had grown quiet. Through the window, Clara could see him tucking Emily into bed, smoothing her wild hair with calloused hands that could be so gentle. He paused in the doorway, his profile silhouetted against the lamplight, and Clara saw what Emily had seen a man standing guard against loneliness, holding it at bay with routine and responsibility. He stepped out onto the porch a few minutes later, seeming unsurprised to find her there. Without speaking, he settled into the other chair, the wood creaking under his weight. They sat in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood that some things couldn't be said on first acquaintance. Maybe couldn't be said at all. Thank you, Clara finally whispered. For everything? Sam nodded, his eyes on the horizon. Emily was right, about the bridge being out for weeks, but there's a wagon trail to Cedar Ridge. Rough going, but passable if you're in a hurry to leave. Clara heard what he wasn't saying. The choice was hers. Stay or go, wait or run. She thought of William Morrison, checking every train, wondering. She thought of Emily's small hand in hers, of this empty house trying so hard to be a home. I'm not in a hurry, she said softly. In the darkness, she thought she saw him smile, The morning sun painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber as Clara sat cross-legged on Emily's bedroom floor, carefully threading a needle. Between them lay the remnants of what had once been Emily's favorite doll, a sad little figure with a torn dress and stuffing spilling from multiple wounds.
Her name is Josephine,
Emily explained solemnly.
Mama made her for me when I was little. She's been through a lot.
Clara's hand stilled for just a moment at the mention of Emily's mother. It was the first time the girl had spoken of her directly.
She's beautiful, Clara said gently. We'll have her fixed up in no time. Papa tried to sew her once, Emily confided. But his stitches were so big she looked like she had train tracks running up her arm.
Clara smiled, beginning the delicate work of reinforcing the doll's seams. Her own mother had taught her to sew with tiny, perfect stitches, a lady's accomplishment that seemed far more useful here than it ever had in Philadelphia society.
You're good at that,
Emily observed, watching intently.
Your fingers know what to do without your eyes telling them. Years of practice.
My mother used to say that idle hands were the devil's workshop.
Papa says that too, except he usually says it when he catches me drawing instead of doing chores.
Emily reached out to touch the doll's yarn hair gently.
Do you think Josephine remembers Mama?
The question caught Clara off guard. I think the people we love leave marks on everything they touch. So yes, in a way, Josephine remembers. Emily seemed satisfied with this answer, falling quiet as Clara worked. Through the window came the rhythmic sound of Sam's axe splitting wood, a steady thunk-thunk that had become the soundtrack to their mornings. He'd been up before dawn, as usual, tending to the cattle and checking fences. Clara had learned his routine: quickly coffee at first light, chores until breakfast, then out to the range until dinner.
There,
Clara said finally, holding up the mended doll.
Good as new.
Emily clutched Josephine to her chest, her eyes shining.
She's perfect. You fixed her just right.
She paused, then added quietly,
You fixed things like Mama did, careful like, making sure they last.
Before Clara could respond, Emily had darted forward to hug her, the embrace fierce and brief before the girl ran off to show her father the repaired doll. Clara remained on the floor, needle still in hand, feeling the echo of those small arms around her neck. 3 days. She'd been at the Carter Ranch for 3 days, and already the rhythm of this life was seeping into her bones. She woke with the roosters, helped Emily with breakfast, spent mornings teaching the girl letters and numbers while Sam worked outside. Afternoons were for chores, learning the temperamental ways of the wood stove, helping Emily gather eggs, mending clothes that had been waiting for attention. She found Sam in the barn, running his hands along a horse's leg, checking for stones. He looked up as Emily burst in, Josephine held high like a trophy.
Look, Papa Clara fixed her. She's whole again.
Sam straightened, his eyes moving from the doll to Clara, who had followed Emily at a more sedate pace. That's fine work, he said simply, but Clara caught something deeper in his expression: surprise, perhaps, or recognition.
Can I show Buttercup?
Emily asked, already heading for the horse stalls.
She'll want to see.
As Emily chattered to her favorite horse, Sam moved closer to Clara. He smelled of leather and hay, honest scents that suited him. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly.
I wanted to.
She clearly loves that doll.
Sarah made it.
The name came out rough, like words too long unspoken. My wife. She had clever hands. Could make something from nothing. Used to say it was better to mend things than throw them away. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she simply stood beside him, watching Emily introduce the newly repaired Josephine to each horse in turn. The barn was warm, filled with the comfortable sounds of animals and the sweet smell of feed.
She died when Emily was 4.
Sam continued, surprising them both. Fever took her in just 3 days. Emily doesn't remember much, which might be a blessing.
I'm sorry,
Clara said, the words inadequate but necessary.
Sam nodded, his jaw tight. We've managed, Emily and me, but some days... He trailed off, then seemed to shake himself. Well, thank you for fixing the doll, for being patient with Emily. She can be overwhelming. She's wonderful, Clara said firmly. Bright and curious and full of life. You've done well with her. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara felt warmth rise in her cheeks. You're not what I expected from a mail-order bride, he said. What did you expect? Someone harder, maybe, or someone desperate enough not to care about the isolation. Not someone who speaks French and sews tiny stitches and makes my daughter laugh like she hasn't in years. The moment stretched between them, taut as wire. Then Emily called out, Papa, Buttercup says she wants to go for a ride. And the spell broke that afternoon. Sam surprised Clara by offering to show her the property. Might as well know the lay of the land while you're here, he said gruffly. Emily, you mind the chickens. They rode in comfortable silence. Sam pointing out landmarks, the creek that ran full in spring, the stand of cottonwoods that marked the property line, the box canyon where cattle took shelter during storms. Clara had ridden before, but never like this, never with the wind tugging her hair free from its pins and the endless sky stretching above. It's beautiful, she said when they stopped at a rise overlooking the valley. Wild and harsh, but beautiful. Most folks see the harsh first, Sam observed. Takes a certain eye to see the beauty. They dismounted to rest the horses, and Sam showed her how to check for rattlesnakes before sitting on a fallen log. The October sun was warm on their faces, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Can I ask you something? Clara ventured. Sam nodded, his eyes on the horizon. Why did you write to the agency? You don't seem like the type of man who would need to advertise for a wife. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Emily needs a mother, someone to teach her things I can't, how to be a lady, how to navigate the world beyond this ranch. And maybe, he picked up a stick, turning it in his hands. Maybe I got tired of talking to cattle and chickens. Clara laughed, surprising them both. They're not great conversationalists. The chickens just complain about everything, and the cattle only want to discuss grass quality. His lips quirked in what was almost a smile. Gets repetitive. This was a different Sam than the silent man who'd met her at the station. Clara found herself wondering how many versions of him existed, the stern father, the grieving widower, this quietly humorous companion. What about you? He asked. What sends a woman like you west to marry a stranger? Clara considered her words carefully. Limited options. My father's business failed, and in Philadelphia. That means social death. Marriage to William Morrison seemed practical. Practical, Sam repeated. That why you're not in a hurry to get to Cedar Ridge? The question hung in the air. Clara pulled at a loose thread on her skirt, avoiding his eyes. I suppose I'm discovering that practical doesn't always mean right. They rode back as the sun began its descent, painting long shadows across the prairie. Emily met them at the barn, bouncing with excitement about finding a particularly large egg. As they unsaddled the horses together, Clara felt a contentment she couldn't name. It was dangerous. This feeling, she had obligations, promises to keep. That evening, as had become their custom, they gathered in the kitchen after supper. Emily worked on her letters while Clara mended one of Sam's shirts, and Sam himself oiled a bridle. The lamplight cast a golden glow over the simple scene, and Clara found herself memorizing it. Emily's tongue poking out in concentration, Sam's hands sure and steady on the leather, the way the light caught the silver threads in his dark hair. There, Emily announced, holding up her slate. I wrote the whole alphabet without help. That's wonderful, Clara praised, examining the carefully formed letters. Tomorrow we'll start on simple words. Can we start with Josephine and Papa and Clara? Clara's heart squeezed. Of course. Later, after Emily was tucked in bed. Clara found herself on the porch again. It was becoming a habit. These quiet moments under the stars. Sam joined her, as she'd known he would, settling into what she'd come to think of as his chair. "She's getting attached," he said without preamble.
"I know. I'm sorry. I don't mean to—"
"I'm not scolding." He leaned back, the chair creaking.
"Just observing. She hasn't been this happy since—"
He didn't finish, but Clara understood. "What will you tell her when I leave?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. "The truth, I suppose, that sometimes people come into our lives for a season. Not forever. That we should be grateful for the time we have." Clara wrapped her shawl tighter, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with the temperature.
"That sounds like something you've had to learn the hard way."
"Most important lessons are—" They sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside, the house that had seemed so empty just days ago now felt full of possibility, of the life that could be. Clara thought of William Morrison, waiting in Cedar Ridge. She'd written him a letter, explaining the delay, but hadn't yet found a way to send it. The truth was, with each passing day, Cedar Ridge felt less like a destination and more like an obligation.
"I should go in,"
she said finally.
"Early morning."
Sam stood when she did, ever the gentleman despite his rough edges. "Clara," he said, then stopped, seeming to wrestle with words. "Thank you, for Emily, for bringing some light back to this place." She met his eyes in the dim light from the window.
"It's a house that wants to be happy again,"
she said softly. Anyone could see that. As she went inside, Clara could feel him watching her, could feel the weight of things unsaid. In her room, she picked up the letter to William Morrison, then set it down again. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow she'd find a way to send it. But tonight, with Emily's repaired doll sitting on the windowsill and Sam's shirt folded neatly for morning, Clara allowed herself to pretend, just for a moment, that she was exactly where she belonged. The wagon wheels kicked up clouds of dust as they rolled into Willow Creek's main street. It had been 10 days since Clara's unexpected arrival, and this was her first return to town, ostensibly to post her long-delayed letter to William Morrison and purchase supplies. Sam drove while Emily sat between them, chattering about everything they passed. "There's where Mr. Henderson's pig got loose and ran through Mrs. Murphy's laundry," Emily pointed out gleefully. "She chased it with a rolling pin for 3 blocks. Clara tried to focus on the child's stories, but her stomach churned with each turn of the wheels. The letter to William Morrison sat heavy in her pocket, each word carefully chosen to explain the delay without revealing how her heart had begun to waver. As Sam pulled the wagon to a stop outside the general store, a commotion near the station caught their attention. A small crowd had gathered, voices raised in excitement. Through the gaps between buildings, Clara could see a train not unusual in itself, except this one had arrived from the west, from the direction of Cedar Ridge. "Wonder what that's about," Sam muttered, helping Clara down from the wagon. His hand lingered on her elbow a moment longer than necessary, and she felt the warmth through her sleeve. They found out soon enough. Mrs. Abernathy, the store owner's wife and town's most efficient gossip, bustled over the moment they entered. "Oh, Mr. Carter. Perfect timing." Her eyes glittered with the joy of someone about to share particularly juicy news. "There's a woman just arrived from Cedar Ridge, a mail-order bride," she says, looking for her intended who never showed up to collect her. "Can you imagine?" Clara's blood ran cold. Beside her, she felt Sam stiffen. "That's so," he said mildly. But Clara heard the tension beneath. "Indeed, she's with that Mr. Hartwell, you know, the marriage broker who comes through every few months. They're asking around town if anyone knows about a missing bride. Apparently, some poor fellow named Morrison has been beside himself with worry." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. Emily, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Can we get peppermint sticks? Papa." "In a minute, Em." Sam's voice was carefully controlled. "Mrs. Abernathy. This woman, where is she now?" "Oh, Mr. Hartwell took her to the boarding house. Though between you and me, she doesn't look suited for frontier life. City bred through and through. All silk and lace and complaints about the dust." Mrs. Abernathy leaned in conspiratorially. "Nothing like your Clara here. Now she's taken to ranch life like a duck to water, hasn't she?" Clara wanted to sink through the floor at being called your Clara. But there was no time to correct the assumption. Through the window, she could see two figures approaching a portly man in a too-tight suit, who could only be Mr. Hartwell, and beside him, a woman in an elaborate traveling dress that belonged on eastern boulevards, not dusty western streets. "Papa, you're squeezing my hand too tight," Emily protested. Sam released his daughter, his face carefully blank. "Clara, perhaps you and Emily should look at the fabric bolts. I know you mentioned needing material for—" The door burst open with a jangle of bells. "Mr. Hartwell strode in, mopping his florid face with a handkerchief. "Ah, customers, good people. I wonder if you might help us. We're looking for a woman, a Miss Clara Evans, who was supposed to arrive in Cedar Ridge 10 days ago." The woman beside him was everything Clara wasn't petite, elaborately coiffed, with the soft look of someone who'd never done a day's hard work. She was pretty in a porcelain doll way, and she looked utterly miserable. "I am Miss Prudence Whitfield," she announced in a voice that suggested she expected recognition. "I was contracted to marry a Mr. Samuel Carter of Willow Creek, but when I arrived, I was told no such arrangement existed. Mr. Hartwell insisted we first search for this missing woman before addressing my situation." Clara felt the color drain from her face. This was the woman Sam had been corresponding with, the real mail-order bride meant for him. She glanced at Sam, seeing her own shock mirrored in his expression. Emily, however, had no such speechlessness. "You can't be here for Papa. He already has Clara." The words fell into the store like stones into still water. Everyone turned to stare, Mr. Hartwell with calculating eyes, Miss Whitfield with indignation, Mrs. Abernathy with barely contained delight at this unexpected drama. "I beg your pardon." Miss Whitfield's voice could have frozen the prairie in July. "And who, pray tell, is Clara?" Clara stepped forward, her legs unsteady. I'm Clara Evans." "Mr." Hartwell's eyes lit up. "Miss Evans. Thank the Lord, mister. Morrison has been beside himself. When you didn't arrive, he feared the worst. Come, we must get you to Cedar Ridge immediately. The bridge has been repaired, and I have a wagon." "Now wait just a minute," Sam interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "Miss Evans is a guest in my home. She goes nowhere without her consent." "Her consent, mister." Hartwell pulled out a sheaf of papers. "She signed a contract, Mr. Carter, legal and binding. She's promised to Mr. William Morrison, not whatever this arrangement is." "There's no arrangement," Clara said quietly, though the words tasted like ash. "There's been a misunderstanding. I got off at the wrong station, and Mr. Carter was kind enough to offer shelter until I could continue my journey." "Papa," Emily's voice was small, confused. "What's happening? Why are they trying to take Clara?" Miss Whitfield seized her opportunity. "Because apparently your father has been harboring another man's bride while leaving me stranded and humiliated." She turned to Sam. "I traveled 2,000 miles to marry you, Mr. Carter. We corresponded for months. You sent money for my passage." Sam's jaw worked. "I sent money for passage. Yes, but I never— That is, I decided not to proceed with the arrangement. I wrote to the agency weeks ago." "Well, the letter never reached me." Miss Whitfield's voice rose to a pitch that made everyone wince. "I've sold everything, left everything, based on your promise." The store erupted in chaos. Mrs. Abernathy tried to soothe Miss Whitfield, who was working herself into a proper hysteria. "Mr. Hartwell waved his contracts like weapons. Emily clung to Clara's skirts, tears streaming down her face. And through it all, Sam stood like a rock in a storm, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "Enough." His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Hartwell, Miss Whitfield, we'll discuss this at the boarding house. Mrs. Abernathy, I'd appreciate some discretion about my private affairs. Emily, go wait in the wagon." "But Papa." "Now, Emily Grace." The child fled, but not before shooting a venomous look at Miss Whitfield. Clara moved to follow, but Sam caught her arm. "Stay," he said quietly. "We need to talk." After the others left, the store felt eerily quiet. Sam led Clara to a corner, away from Mrs. Abernathy's eager ears. "Is it true?" he asked. "You signed a contract to marry this Morrison." Clara nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I did. I was going to tell you, the letter I was posting today was to him, explaining the delay." And now, his voice was carefully neutral. "What will you do now?" What could she say that in 10 days, his quiet ranch had become more home than Philadelphia ever was, that Emily had claimed a piece of her heart, that when he smiled, rare as it was, something in her chest fluttered like a caged bird. "I have an obligation," she whispered, "just as you do to Miss Whitfield. I wrote to cancel, but she didn't receive it. She's here now, and she's right, you did promise." Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. "We both made commitments before we met. Perhaps this is God's way of reminding us of our duties." Sam's face was stone. "Is that what you think, that duty is more important than—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "You're right, of course. Forgive me. I'll take you to Cedar Ridge myself. Tomorrow, if you wish." The offer was like a physical blow. Tomorrow, in her foolishness. She'd let herself forget that this was temporary, that she was living on borrowed time in a borrowed life. "That would be appropriate," she managed. "I should go to Emily. She'll be upset." "Clara," her name on his lips stopped her. "I need you to know these 10 days. Don't," she pressed her eyes closed. "Please don't. It will only make leaving harder." When she opened her eyes, he was gone, the store bells jangling in his wake. Mrs. Abernathy peered around a display of preserves, fairly vibrating with curiosity. "My dear, what a terrible misunderstanding. Though I must say, you and Mr. Carter We seemed nothing," Clara said firmly. "I was a guest, nothing more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to comfort a little girl whose world just tilted off its axis." She found Emily in the wagon, curled into a ball of misery. The child launched herself at Clara the moment she appeared. "You can't leave," Emily sobbed. "You can't. You fixed Josephine and taught me letters and made Papa smile. That other lady is mean and horrible, and she'll never love us." Clara held the shaking child, her own tears falling silently. "Oh, sweetheart, sometimes adults make promises they have to keep, even when their hearts want something else." "But you belong with us, I prayed and prayed, and God sent you." "Maybe," Clara said softly. "God sent me to help you for a little while, to fix Josephine and teach you letters and remind your papa how to smile. Maybe that was his plan all along." Emily pulled back, her face fierce. "No, you're supposed to stay. You're supposed to be my mama." The words shattered something in Clara's chest. She'd been so careful not to think it, not to name the feeling that had grown with each passing day. But Emily, with a child's clarity, had spoken the truth Clara had been too cowardly to acknowledge. Sam returned then, his face unreadable. He climbed into the wagon without a word, and they rode home in silence, broken only by Emily's sniffles. The prairie that had seemed so beautiful that morning now stretched endless and desolate. Even the sky seemed grayer, as if the world itself mourned what was about to be lost. That night,
Clara packed her few belongings with mechanical precision. Tomorrow. Sam would take her to Cedar Ridge. Tomorrow. She would meet William Morrison and begin the life she'd contracted for. Tomorrow. She would pretend that 10 days hadn't changed everything. Through her window, she could see Sam on the porch, a solitary figure against the darkness. She wondered if he was thinking of Miss Whitfield, of the bride he'd sent for and then rejected, or if, like her, he was memorizing these last hours, storing them against the empty years ahead. Emily had refused supper and cried herself to sleep. Clutching Josephine so tightly, Clara worried the new seams might tear. The sound of the child's grief echoed in the house like a ghost, a preview of the silence that would settle once Clara was gone. She pressed her hand to the window, watching Sam's still form. 10 days to find and lose everything she'd never known she wanted. God's timing, she thought bitterly, left much to be desired. The morning came too soon, bringing with it a gray dawn that matched Clara's mood. She dressed carefully in her traveling clothes, the same ones she'd worn when she'd arrived, now bearing the faint scent of sage and prairie wind. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair, each movement feeling like a goodbye. Downstairs, Sam had breakfast waiting coffee, biscuits, and silence thick as molasses. Emily's chair sat empty, the child having locked herself in her room and refused to come out despite both adults' gentle coaxing. "I'm sorry," Clara said, the words inadequate. "I never meant for her to be hurt." Sam's knuckles were white around his coffee cup. "I know." He cleared his throat. "The wagon's ready, soon as you're finished." But Clara couldn't eat. Each bite felt like sawdust in her mouth. Through the window, she could see her trunk already loaded, a finality to its presence that made her stomach clench. "Sam?" she began, then stopped. What was there to say that she'd fallen in love with this life in just 10 days, that leaving felt like tearing off a piece of her soul, that she'd rather face a lifetime of prairie storms than the genteel prison of a loveless marriage? "You don't have to explain," he said quietly. "We both know how the world works. Contracts and obligations, honor and duty." His laugh was bitter. Funny how those words feel like chains. A crash from upstairs made them both jump. Emily's voice carried down, high and desperate. "I won't come out. I won't say goodbye. You can't make me." Clara rose. "Let me try." She found Emily barricaded behind her bed. Josephine clutched to her chest. The room looked like a tornado had passed through, books scattered, drawings torn from the walls, her collection of treasures swept from the windowsill. "Go away," Emily said, but her voice was thick with tears. Clara sat on the floor, not attempting to breach the barricade. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen. Can you do that?" Silence, then a small sniffle. "When I was your age, my best friend moved away. I was so angry. I refused to say goodbye. I hid in the garden shed and wouldn't come out, not even when she came looking for me." Clara's voice caught at the memory. "Do you know what happened?" "What?" The word was muffled but curious despite itself. "I never saw her again. And for years, Emily, I regretted not saying goodbye, not telling her how much she meant to me, not having one last hug." Clara pressed her hand to the floor, wishing she could reach through to the child. "Don't be like me, sweetheart. Don't let anger steal your chance to say what's in your heart." Slowly, the bed scraped across the floor. Emily emerged, her face blotchy and swollen. Without a word, she threw herself into Clara's arms, sobbing as if her heart would break, which, Clara supposed, it was. "I hate this," Emily whispered. "I hate everything." "I know. I hate it too." "Then why do you have to go?" Clara smoothed the child's tangled hair. "Remember when we talked about fixing Josephine, how sometimes broken things need mending?" Emily nodded against her shoulder. "Well, sometimes people make promises, and breaking them would make something else broken. My word, my honor, and your papa's too." "Honor is stupid," Emily declared.
Sometimes it feels that way. Clara agreed. But it's what separates good people from bad ones. Your papa is a good man. Emily, the best. And part of what makes him good is that he keeps his word, even when it hurts. Emily pulled back, studying Clara's face with those impossibly blue eyes. Do you love him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Clara could lie, could make this easier, but Emily deserved truth. Sometimes 10 days is enough to know what could be, even if it can never happen. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have to give. They walked downstairs together, Emily's hand gripped tight in Clara's. Sam stood by the door, hat in hand, looking like a man heading to his own execution. When he saw them, something flickered across his face, relief, perhaps, or fresh pain. The ride to Cedar Ridge took 3 hours. 3 hours of Emily pressed against Clara's side. 3 hours of Sam's rigid back as he drove. 3 hours of memorizing the way the wind sang through the grass, the distant purple mountains, the creak of wagon wheels that had become the rhythm of home. Cedar Ridge was larger than Willow Creek, boasting 2 hotels, 3 saloons, and actual storefronts with glass windows. It looked prosperous and bustling and utterly foreign to Clara now. How quickly she'd adapted to the simple life. She thought, how completely she'd been changed. William Morrison was waiting at the station, mister. Hartwell had wired ahead. Clara recognized him from the photograph he'd sent, though he looked older, more weathered. He was handsome in a conventional way, with neat clothes and pomaded hair. Everything proper, everything respectable, everything opposite to Sam's raw, honest presence. Miss Evans! Morrison rushed forward as Sam helped her down from the wagon. My dear, I've been beside myself when you didn't arrive. I feared the worst. Mr. Morrison. Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears. I apologize for the worry. As Mr. Hartwell explained, I disembarked at the wrong station due to the washed-out bridge. Yes, he told me. Morrison's eyes flickered between Clara and the Carters, clearly puzzled by the small girl clinging to Clara's skirts. And these kind folks took you in. This is Mr. Carter and his daughter Emily, Clara said formally. They've been very gracious. Morrison extended his hand to Sam. I'm in your debt, sir. Caring for my intended, keeping her safe. I must reimburse you for any expenses. That won't be necessary. Sam's voice was flint. He hadn't taken the offered hand. We don't charge for basic Christian charity. An awkward silence fell. Emily broke it by tugging on Clara's dress. You forgot this, she said, pressing something into Clara's hand. It was a small river stone, smooth and perfect, from her collection. So you remember us? Emily whispered. Clara's composure cracked. She knelt, pulling Emily close one last time. As if I could forget, she murmured against the child's hair. Take care of your papa and keep practicing your letters. I will, Emily promised, every day. Then, even softer. I'll keep praying too. Maybe God will change his mind. Clara stood on unsteady legs. Sam had unloaded her trunk and set it on the platform. Their eyes met over the distant gray storm, meeting brown earth, and everything they couldn't say passed between them in that look. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. He touched the brim of his hat. Ma'am. Then, to Morrison. You've got yourself a fine woman. See that you deserve her. The warning in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Morrison bristled slightly but managed a thin smile. I assure you, I understand my good fortune. Sam lifted Emily into the wagon. She didn't wave goodbye, just stared at Clara with those devastating blue eyes until Sam clicked to the horses and they rolled away. Clara watched until they were swallowed by distance and dust, her heart feeling like it was being pulled from her chest with every turn of the wheels. Well, Morrison's voice was too bright, too eager. Let's get you settled. Shall we? I've taken rooms at the hotel until the ceremony.
Thought you'd want a few days to recover from your ordeal. Ordeal. Is that what the last 10 days had been? Clara let him guide her toward the hotel, his hand proprietary on her elbow. He chattered about the town, his business prospects, the house he was building. She made appropriate responses, but heard none of it. Her mind was 3 hours back down a dusty road, in a kitchen where a little girl practiced her letters and a quiet man smiled so rarely it felt like sunrise when he did. The hotel room was nice, clean, properly appointed with matching furniture and curtains that actually hung straight. Morrison had spent money to impress her. She could see that. He was trying so hard to please, and she felt nothing but a hollow ache where gratitude should be. "I'll let you rest," Morrison said after showing her around. "Dinner's at 6 in the dining room. I've so much to tell you. Plans to share. Oh, Clara, I'm so glad you're finally here." He took her hand and kissed it, a perfectly proper gesture that felt entirely wrong. His hands were soft. She noticed. No calluses from rope or reins. No scars from mending fences or breaking horses. Gentlemen's hands. Safe hands. Dead hands. When he left, Clara sank onto the bed and finally let the tears come. She cried for Emily, who would wake tomorrow without her. She cried for Sam, who would return to his empty porch and silent stars. She cried for herself, for the coward she was, choosing safety over love, duty over joy. Outside her window, Cedar Ridge bustled with commerce and purpose. Somewhere in this town was the house Morrison was building, the life he'd planned for them. It would be a good life, she told herself. Comfortable, respectable, everything she'd thought she wanted when she'd answered that advertisement back in Philadelphia. But her treacherous heart kept returning to a simpler house, where the stove had moods and the chickens had names, where a little girl's laughter could light up a room and a man's rare smile felt like a gift from heaven. She pulled out Emily's stone, running her thumb over its smooth surface. Through her tears, she could almost see it, Emily at the creek, choosing this particular stone from all the others, saving it for someone special. Tomorrow she would meet Morrison's friends, tour his business, begin the charade of building a life together. Tomorrow she would smile and nod and play the part of the grateful mail-order bride, saved from uncertainty by a good man's generosity. But tonight, Clara clutched a river stone and mourned for the family she'd found and lost, for the love she'd glimpsed but couldn't claim, for the version of herself she'd discovered on a ranch outside Willow Creek, a woman who could mend dolls and gentle hearts, who could learn the language of silence and find it more eloquent than words. The stone was warm from her hand now, carrying heat like a tiny piece of the prairie sun. Clara pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes, letting herself pretend for just a moment that she could still smell sage on the wind, still hear Emily's voice calling, "Clara, come see what I found," still see Sam silhouetted against the evening sky, standing guard against the darkness. Tomorrow she would do her duty. Tonight, she grieved for everything duty would cost her. The Carter Ranch had never felt emptier. Sam stood in the doorway of the spare room, Clara's room. His mind insisted on calling it, staring at the neatly made bed, the washstand with its empty basin, the wardrobe that no longer held her few simple dresses. Even the air felt different, missing some essential element that had made the house feel alive these past 10 days. "Papa!" Emily's voice was small, hesitant. She stood in the hallway, Josephine dangling from one hand. "I can't find my slate." Sam's heart clenched. The slate was on the kitchen table, right where Clara had left it after yesterday's lesson. But Emily hadn't been in the kitchen since they'd returned from Cedar Ridge. She'd gone straight to her room and hadn't emerged for supper, despite his coaxing. "It's downstairs, sweetheart. Come on, I'll make us some breakfast."
"I'm not hungry."
"You need to eat something." Emily shook her head, retreating to her room. Sam heard the door close with a soft click that might as well have been a slam. He pressed his palms against his eyes, feeling every one of his 36 years. How did he fix this? How did he explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes doing the right thing felt like cutting off your own arm?
A knock at the front door interrupted his brooding. Sam descended the stairs heavily, expecting perhaps a neighbor or someone needing help with cattle. He wasn't prepared for Miss Prudence Whitfield standing on his porch, her elaborate dress incongruous against the simple wooden boards. Mr. Carter," her voice was crisp, businesslike. "May I come in? We need to discuss our situation." Sam stepped aside wordlessly. In the parlor, Miss Whitfield perched on the edge of a chair like a bird ready to take flight. In the morning light, he could see she was pretty enough, with delicate features and carefully styled blonde hair. Everything a man should want in a wife. Everything that left him cold as winter stone. "I've been thinking," she began without preamble. Our arrangement, it's not going to work." Sam blinked, caught off guard. "I beg your pardon." "Oh, don't look so shocked." She waved a gloved hand dismissively. "I've spent 2 days in this place, the dust, the isolation, the complete absence of culture or refinement, and that child of yours." She paused, seeming to reconsider her words. "Well, let's just say she's made her feelings about me quite clear. Emily's been through a lot. She just needs time. She needs a mother, Mr. Carter, but not me." Miss Whitfield's expression softened slightly. "I'm not a fool. I saw how you looked at that Evans woman, how she looked at you, and how your daughter clung to her like she was life itself." Sam's jaw tightened. "Miss Evans has nothing to do with Stop!" The word was sharp. "Let's speak plainly. You don't want me here. I don't want to be here. The only thing keeping us bound to this farce is some misguided sense of honor and a contract neither of us wants to fulfill. You came 2,000 miles. Sam said slowly. "Sold everything. What will you do?" For the first time, Miss Whitfield smiled a real smile, not the practiced simper she'd worn since arrival. "Mr. Hartwell introduced me to a banker in town, Mr. Theodore Bassett, recent widower, 3 young children, desperately needs help managing his household. He's offered me a position as housekeeper with very generous terms." Her cheeks pinked slightly. "He's also hinted that, should we suit, a more permanent arrangement might be discussed. And this is what you want." "What I want is a comfortable life with a man who values what I can offer. Mr. Bassett appreciates my education, my refinement. His children need guidance in proper behavior and social graces, things I can actually provide." She leaned forward earnestly. "Your Emily needs something else entirely. She needs someone who can teach her to be strong and capable in this wild place. Someone who can mend her dolls and her heart with equal skill." Sam stared at this woman he'd thought he knew through letters, seeing her clearly for the first time. "You're releasing me from our agreement." "I'm releasing us both," she corrected. "Mr. Hartwell can witness the dissolution of the contract. No fault on either side. We simply, didn't suit." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of possibility settling over Sam like morning dew. Then Miss Whitfield stood, smoothing her skirts with practiced efficiency. "One more thing, Mr. Carter. That woman, Miss Evans, when you fetch her back, and you will fetch her back, don't wait another 10 days to tell her how you feel. Some of us aren't meant for grand romance, but those who are shouldn't waste it on propriety." She swept out before he could respond, leaving Sam alone with the thundering of his own heart. From upstairs came the sound of Emily's door opening, small feet on the landing. She must have been listening. "Papa?" Emily peered around the corner. "Did she leave?" "She did. For good. For good." Emily flew down the stairs and into his arms, her thin body shaking with sobs of relief. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Scared you'd make me call her Mama. Scared Clara would marry that man and never come back. Scared everything would be wrong forever." Sam held his daughter close, his own eyes burning. "I know, baby girl. I was scared too." Emily pulled back, her tear-stained face fierce with determination. "We have to get Clara back. Papa, we have to tell her she belongs with us." She made a commitment. "No." Emily stamped her foot. You always say we should fight for what matters. You fought in the war for what you believed in. You fought the drought to save the ranch. You fought Mama's fever even when Doc said there was no hope. Her blue eyes blazed. Isn't Clara worth fighting for? Sam stared at his daughter, this slip of a girl with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. When had she gotten so wise? When had she learned to see straight through to the heart of things? "Get your coat," he said roughly, "and find that box in my room, the one with Mama's things." Emily's eyes widened.
Really?
"Really, but first, I need you to show me something." He followed Emily to her room, where she pulled out a piece of paper hidden under her pillow. It was covered in Clara's neat handwriting. Not a lesson, but a letter. "She wrote it for me," Emily explained. "That last morning when you were getting the wagon ready. Said I could read it when I missed her too much." Sam read the words, his throat tightening with each line. Asterisk. "My dearest Emily, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I need you to know that leaving you is the hardest thing I've ever done. You asked me once if Josephine remembered your mama. I think now that love leaves marks on us, invisible threads that connect our hearts even across distance and time. You've marked my heart. Sweet girl, no matter where I go, part of me will always be with you in that room where we fixed Josephine, in the kitchen where you showed me your treasures, in all the small moments that became so precious. Be good for your papa. Keep practicing your letters. And remember, you are loved beyond measure."
Papa,
Emily said softly.
she loves us. It says so right there. People who love each other should be together.
Sam folded the letter carefully. "You're right, they should." He stood, decision crystallizing like ice on a winter morning. "Go get your coat. We're going to Cedar Ridge." To bring Clara home. To bring Clara home. Within minutes, they were in the wagon, Sam driving the horses harder than he usually would. Emily bounced beside him, alternating between excited chatter and worried silence. The box from Sarah's things sat between them inside. Among other treasures was Sarah's wedding ring. Sam had never thought to use it again, but somehow he knew Sarah would approve. She'd always been one for practical romance, for love that built something lasting.
What if she already married him?
Emily asked as Cedar Ridge came into view. "Then we'll wish her well and come home," Sam said, though the words felt like ground glass. "But what if she didn't? What if she's waiting for us?" "Then we'll do whatever it takes to convince her she belongs with us." They went to the hotel first. The clerk, a nervous man with thinning hair, fidgeted when Sam asked for Clara Evans. "She was here." "Yes, sir, but she checked out this morning. Mr. Morrison moved the wedding up there at the church right now." Emily made a sound like a wounded animal. Sam's hands clenched into fists, but he forced his voice to remain steady. "The church? Which way?" "2 blocks down. Turn left. But, sir, the ceremony's already started." Sam was moving before the man finished speaking, Emily running to keep up. 2 blocks had never seemed so long. His mind raced with the words he should have said, the chances he'd let slip by. 10 days. 10 days to find everything and lose it to his own cowardice. The church doors loomed before them, solid oak barriers between them and whatever was happening inside. Sam could hear the minister's voice, muffled but unmistakable in its ceremonial cadence.
"Papa,"
Emily whispered urgently.
"we have to stop it."
Sam pushed open the doors. The scene inside froze like a tableau, the minister mid-sentence, Morrison in his Sunday best, a handful of witnesses turning to stare, and Clara, in a simple gray dress, her face pale as prairie snow, her eyes widening as they met Sam's across the distance. "Stop," Sam said, the word coming out rougher than intended. "Just stop." "Sir," the minister sputtered, "this is a sacred ceremony. You cannot simply—"
"Papa."
Emily darted past him, racing up the aisle. "Clara, you can't marry him. Miss Prudence left. She's going to marry the banker instead, and Papa has something to tell you." Clara's hand went to her throat. "Emily, what?" I'm sorry, Sam interrupted, walking slowly up the aisle.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Reverend Morrison, but I need to say something, and if I don't say it now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life.
Morrison stepped forward, face flushed with anger. Now see here. No, you see here, Sam said firmly. 10 days ago, this woman got off at the wrong station. Or maybe it was the right station, because those 10 days showed me something I'd forgotten, that a house can become a home again, that a broken heart can heal, that sometimes God's plans don't match our own, but they're better for it. He reached Clara, close enough to see the tears gathering in her eyes. You asked me once why I wrote to the agency. I gave you half an answer. The whole truth is, I was lonely. So lonely I couldn't breathe sometimes. And then you showed up with your fancy education and your gentle hands and your way of making Emily laugh. And suddenly, I could breathe again.
Sam?
Clara whispered. I'm not a man of pretty words, he continued. I can't offer you wealth or an easy life, just a ranch that fights us every day, a daughter who'll love you fierce and forever, and a man who'd rather face 1,000 prairie storms than another day without you. He pulled out Sarah's ring, the gold catching the light through the church windows. This was my wife's. Sarah would have liked you, would have loved how you brought light back to our home. I think she'd want you to have it, if you'll take it, if you'll take us. The church held its breath. Clara looked from Sam to Emily to the ring, then finally to Morrison, who stood rigid with indignation.
I'm sorry, she said softly. William, you're a good man. You deserve someone who can love you wholly, but my heart... She turned back to Sam. My heart got off at the wrong station, too.
What happened next would be debated in Willow Creek for years. Some said Clara flew down those church steps like she had wings. Others insisted Sam met her halfway, catching her in arms that would never let go again. Everyone agreed that Emily's whoop of joy could be heard 3 blocks away. Morrison protested. Of course, threatened breach of contract, demanded compensation, created enough fuss that Sheriff Baker had to be called. But when the sheriff heard the whole story, including Miss Whitfield's voluntary dissolution of her contract and her convenient engagement to banker Bassett, he suggested perhaps everyone might be happier if they just let matters sort themselves out. Seems to me, the sheriff said with barely hidden amusement, everyone's ending up where they're supposed to be. No harm done except to pride, and that heals quick enough. And so, on a crisp October afternoon, Clara found herself back in a wagon heading toward Willow Creek, Emily chattering excitedly beside her, Sam's hand warm and steady over hers, the ring Sarah's ring. Her ring now caught the light with every bump in the road.
I knew it,
Emily announced.
I told you God would change his mind. He just needed us to be brave enough to ask.
Clara laughed, the sound carrying across the prairie like music.
You were right, sweetheart, about everything. Does this mean I can call you Mama now?
Clara's eyes met Sam's over Emily's head. In them she saw her future, not the one she'd planned, but the one she'd been meant for all along.
If you'd like,
she said softly.
I'd like,
Emily said firmly. Then, with the casual wisdom of children,
Papa, God finally answered us. He just took the long way around.
Sam pulled his daughter close with one arm, keeping the other firmly around Clara. Sometimes, he said, the long way's the only way to get where you're going. As they rolled toward home, and it was home, Clara realized, more than any place had ever been, she thought about wrong stations and right destinations, about broken dolls and mended hearts, about the courage it took to choose love over duty. The prairie stretched endless before them, golden in the afternoon light, and Clara, her hand in Sam's, Emily's head on her shoulder, knew with certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The storm rolled in from the mountains like God's own fury, turning the afternoon sky black as coal. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the clouds build with growing unease. Sam had ridden out that morning to check the cattle in the north pasture, a full day's work in good weather.
Now, with the wind picking up and the first fat raindrops spattering against the glass, worry gnawed at her insides.
Papa knows to find shelter,
Emily said from the table where she was practicing her letters. But Clara heard the tremor in the child's voice, saw how her pencil had stilled on the slate.
Of course he does,
Clara agreed, forcing brightness into her tone.
Your father's the most capable man I know. He's probably holed up in that line shack he showed me, waiting for the worst to pass.
Thunder crashed overhead, so loud the dishes rattled in the cupboard. Emily abandoned her slate and pressed close to Clara's side. Outside, the rain had become a solid wall of water, obscuring everything beyond the porch steps. The wind howled like a living thing, battering the house with primal force.
I don't like this,
Emily whispered. Neither did Clara. This wasn't like the gentle rains she'd known in Philadelphia. This was nature at its most violent, reminding humans how small and vulnerable they really were. And somewhere out there, Sam was alone in it. They tried to maintain normalcy as the storm raged. Clara made tea and told stories, helped Emily with her sewing, anything to distract from the tempest outside. But as afternoon darkened toward evening with no sign of Sam, pretense became impossible.
He should be back by now,
Emily said, voicing what Clara had been thinking for the past hour. Even with the storm, he should be back. Clara knelt beside the child, taking her small hands. Your papa's smart and strong. He knows this land better than anyone.
Mama said that too.
Emily's voice was barely audible above the storm. The night she got sick, said Papa would be back from town soon with the medicine. But the storm was too bad, and he couldn't get through. And by morning she was...
Oh, sweetheart.
Clara pulled Emily close, feeling the child tremble.
This isn't the same. Your papa's not fighting to get somewhere else.
He's fighting to get home to us. And nothing, not even this storm, is stronger than that. But as another hour passed with no sign of Sam, Clara's own faith began to waver. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it seemed to be gathering strength. Water poured from the sky in sheets, and the wind was strong enough to send loose boards flying like birds.
I'm going to look for him,
Clara announced suddenly, unable to bear the waiting another moment. No, Emily grabbed her arm.
You can't. You don't know the land like Papa does. You'll get lost, and then I'll lose you both.
The naked fear in the child's voice stopped Clara cold. Emily was right. She'd been here less than 2 weeks total. She had no business riding out into this maelstrom. But how could she just sit here while Sam might be hurt, needing help? Then we'll watch from the porch, Clara compromised, just to see if we can spot him. They wrapped themselves in shawls and ventured onto the covered porch. The wind immediately tried to tear the door from Clara's hands. Rain drove sideways, soaking them despite the roof overhead. Clara had to squint against the assault of water and debris, searching desperately for any sign of horse and rider.
There!
Emily shouted suddenly, pointing. By the barn! Clara saw it too, a dark shape moving through the storm. But it was just a loose barrel, tumbling end over end across the yard. Her heart sank. We should go back inside, she called over the wind.
We'll...
Lightning split the sky, illuminating everything in stark, white relief. In that frozen moment, Clara saw him not coming from the north as expected, but from the east, hunched low over his horse, moving slowly but steadily toward home. Sam! She was off the porch before thought could catch up with action, running through the torrential rain. Sam! He saw her coming and dismounted, catching her as she flung herself at him. He was soaked through, shaking with cold, but blessedly, wonderfully alive. Clara, what do you get inside? He had to shout over the storm.
I thought we were so worried.
Inside, both of you. Emily had followed Clara into the storm, and Sam scooped her up with one arm while keeping the other around Clara. Together they struggled to the house, Sam pausing only to release his exhausted horse into the barn. Once inside, Clara could see how bad it had been,
Sam's face was cut from flying debris, his clothes torn. He was favoring his left side, and when he tried to remove his coat, he couldn't suppress a groan of pain. "You're hurt," Clara said, reaching for him. "It's nothing. Horse spooked at lightning, threw me into a ravine. Ribs are just bruised." But he let her help him out of the sodden coat, sinking into a chair with obvious relief. "Couldn't make the line shack. Had to hole up under an overhang. Wait for a break. Sorry I worried you." "Sorry." Clara's hands shook as she fetched towels, stoked the stove higher. "Sam Carter, you ride in half dead from a storm, and you're apologizing." Emily had climbed into her father's lap, clinging like a burr. "I was scared. Papa, like when Mama—" Sam's arms tightened around his daughter. "I know, baby girl, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Clara bustled around them, bringing dry clothes, heating water for tea, needing the activity to channel the overwhelming relief coursing through her. She'd known she cared for this man, but the depth of her fear at possibly losing him revealed truths she wasn't quite ready to face. "Clara!" Sam's voice stopped her constant motion. "I'm all right. Come here." She went, unable to resist the quiet command. Sam caught her hand, pulling her down to sit on the chair arm. His fingers were ice cold, but his grip was sure. "When I was out there," he said quietly. "When the horse went down, and I thought for a moment I might not make it back. You know what I thought about?" Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I thought about you and Emily at the kitchen table, working on letters, about coming home to lamplight and laughter instead of silence, about all the years I want to have with you that I almost didn't get." His gray eyes held hers, intense as the storm outside. "I've lost someone to a storm before, the thought of leaving you and Em alone." "But you didn't," Clara interrupted, unable to bear the pain in his voice. "You fought your way home. You're here." "Promise me something," Sam said urgently. "If anything happens to me." "Nothing's going to happen." "Promise me," he insisted. "You'll stay. You'll take care of Emily. This will be your home no matter what." Clara's eyes filled. "Sam—" "I need to know you won't just disappear back east, that Emily won't lose another mother." "I promise," Clara whispered. "But you have to promise too. Promise you'll always fight to come home, that you won't take unnecessary chances." "Deal," he said softly. Emily, squished between them, piped up, "I promise too, to be good and help with chores and not put frogs in the wash basin anymore." "Despite everything," Sam chuckled. "When did you put frogs in the wash basin?" Maybe we should talk about that later." The tension broke like the storm outside, which was finally beginning to ease. Clara helped Sam into dry clothes, wincing at the bruises spreading across his ribs. She made him sit by the fire while she and Emily prepared a late supper, the simple domesticity a balm after the afternoon's terror. "I could get used to this," Sam said later, fed and warm, Emily drowsing against his shoulder. "Being fussed over." "Don't get too used to it," Clara warned, but her severity was undermined by the gentle way she brushed his damp hair back from his forehead. "Though, if it keeps you from riding into storms—" "No storm could keep me from coming home," he said simply. "Not anymore." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. This was home now, not just a place, but a promise. The three of them, bound by choice rather than blood, by love rather than law. The storm finally blew itself out near midnight, leaving behind a world washed clean. Clara insisted Sam sleep downstairs by the fire rather than climb to his room, and she curled up in Sarah's old rocker to keep watch. Emily sprawled on the rug between them, unwilling to be separated from either adult. "You don't have to stay up," Sam murmured, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "I want to," Clara said softly. "Go to sleep. I'll be here." She watched over them as they slept, her heart so full it ached. The storm had shown her something vital, how quickly life could change, how precious each moment was.
When Sam had appeared through the rain, she'd known with crystalline clarity that this was where she belonged. Not because of promises or contracts, but because the thought of losing him had nearly brought her to her knees. Near dawn, Sam stirred. Finding her still watching, he held out his hand. "Come here." She went, letting him pull her down to sit beside him on the makeshift bed. His arm came around her, solid and warm. "Thank you," he whispered. "For waiting, for worrying, for being here when I got home." "Always," she whispered back. They stayed like that as the sun rose, painting the rain-washed world in shades of gold and pearl. Emily woke with the light, stretching like a cat before climbing up to complete their little circle. "Is the storm over?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart," Clara assured her. "The storm is over." But looking at Sam, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes, Clara knew that wasn't quite true. The physical storm had passed, but the emotional one, the one that had driven him out into danger and her into the rain after him, had revealed feelings too powerful to ignore much longer. Soon, they would have to speak of marriage, of making official what their hearts already knew. Soon. But not yet. For now, it was enough to sit in the morning light, grateful for storms weathered and home preserved, for the family forged not by chance, but by choice. "Look," Emily said suddenly, pointing out the window. "A rainbow." Sure enough, arcing across the prairie sky was a perfect rainbow, its colors vivid against the retreating clouds. It seemed to stretch from their little ranch all the way to the mountains, a bridge of light connecting earth and heaven. "Mama used to say rainbows were God's promises," Emily said softly, "that after every storm, there's beauty waiting." Clara pressed a kiss to the child's hair, her eyes meeting Sam's over Emily's head. "Your mama was a wise woman." "Yes," Sam agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "She was, and I think she'd be happy to know we found our rainbow after the storm." As the morning brightened around them, Clara understood what he meant. They'd all weathered their storms, loss and loneliness, fear and uncertainty. But here, in this simple house on the endless prairie, they'd found their rainbow. They'd found each other. The physical storm had tested Sam's strength and revealed Clara's fear of losing him. But more than that, it had stripped away the last pretenses between them. There was no more talk of temporary arrangements or doing what was proper. There was only this: a man, a woman, and a child, bound together by something stronger than any storm. Home, Clara thought, tightening her arms around her family. They were home. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of brilliant blue sky that only October in Wyoming could produce. Clara stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun paint the prairie gold, her heart so full she could barely breathe. In just a few hours, she would marry Sam Carter not because of a contract or arrangement, but because she couldn't imagine a life without him and Emily. "You look beautiful," Emily said from the doorway, already dressed in her new blue dress the color of her eyes, the color of hope, like a princess from one of those stories you tell me. Clara turned from the window, smoothing the simple cream dress she'd sewn herself. It wasn't elaborate like the gown she'd imagined wearing to marry William Morrison, but it was perfect for marrying a man she loved under the cottonwood tree behind their home. "And you look like an angel," Clara said, adjusting Emily's hair ribbon. "Your papa won't know what hit him when he sees us." Emily giggled, then grew serious. "Clara, can I tell you something?" "Always, sweetheart." "Last night, I talked to Mama, not out loud, but in my heart. I told her about you, about how happy you make Papa and me. And you know what?" Clara knelt, bringing herself to Emily's eye level. "What?" "I think she smiled. I think she's happy we found you." Emily threw her arms around Clara's neck. "I love you, Mama Clara." The name spontaneous and perfect brought tears to Clara's eyes. "I love you too, my darling girl, more than words can say." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Mrs."
Henderson from the neighboring ranch peered in. Her weathered face creased in a smile. "The menfolk are getting antsy downstairs. That Sam's wearing a path in the floorboards with his pacing." Clara laughed, wiping her eyes.
"We can't have that. The floors have enough character already."
The small gathering of neighbors and friends had assembled in the yard behind the house. Someone had strung wildflowers between the fence posts, and benches had been arranged in rough rows. It was simple, heartfelt, perfect, so different from the elaborate church ceremony she'd almost had in Cedar Ridge. But when Clara stepped onto the back porch and saw Sam waiting under the cottonwood tree, she knew this was exactly right. He stood tall in his Sunday best, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Beside him, Reverend Thompson from Willow Creek smiled benevolently, Bible in hand. The walk across the yard felt both endless and too quick. Clara was aware of the neighbors' warm smiles, of Emily scattering flower petals with enthusiastic abandon. But mostly she was aware of Sam, the way his face softened when their eyes met, the way his hand trembled slightly when he reached for hers. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Thompson began, "we are gathered here on this glorious morning to witness something special, not just a marriage, but the official forming of a family that, from what I hear, God has already put together in his own mysterious way." A chuckle ran through the small crowd. Everyone knew the story by now, the wrong station. Emily's prayer. The storms weathered both literal and figurative. "Samuel, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and hold, through prairie storms and peaceful mornings, through whatever this wild land might throw at you?" Sam's voice was steady and sure.
"I do, with everything I am."
"Clara, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to stand beside him, to make a home with him, to love both him and his daughter as your own?"
"I do,"
Clara whispered, then stronger.
"I absolutely do."
"And Emily," the Reverend said, smiling down at the little girl.
"Do you take Clara to be your mama? To love and mind and maybe not put any more frogs in the wash basin?"
"I do," Emily shouted, causing everyone to laugh. "But I can't promise about the frogs." "Well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad," Reverend Thompson said with a wink. "Now, Sam, I believe you have something to say." Sam cleared his throat, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "Clara, 2 weeks ago you got off at what you thought was the wrong station, but I believe we believe it was exactly where you were supposed to be. You brought light back to our home, laughter back to our hearts. You took 2 broken people and helped make us whole. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you all the days of my life. This ring," he slipped Sarah's gold band onto her finger, "represents not just my promise, but the blessing of the past and the hope of the future." Clara had to blink back tears as she spoke her own vows.
"Sam, Emily, you gave me shelter when I was lost, but more than that, you gave me purpose. You showed me that home isn't a place but the people who hold your heart. I promise to love you both, to stand with you through whatever comes, to be a wife and mother and partner in this beautiful, difficult, wonderful life we're building together." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming," Reverend Thompson declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife, and Emily officially the luckiest little girl in the territory to have such parents. Sam, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was gentle, sweet, a promise sealed. But the real moment came when Emily bounded up to join them, and Sam lifted her with one arm, creating a 3-way embrace that had everyone reaching for handkerchiefs. "Now we're really a family,"
Emily announced to the assembled crowd.
"and everyone's invited to eat cake."
The reception was held in the yard, tables groaning under the weight of dishes the neighbor women had brought. There was music from Mr. Sullivan's fiddle, dancing on the packed earth, and more laughter than the ranch had heard in years. Clara watched it all with a full heart, marveling at how her life had changed. "No regrets?" Sam asked, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of punch.
"Only one,"
Clara said, taking a cup. His face fell. "What?" that it took me so long to find you." Relief and joy transformed his features. You know what Emily would say to that? That God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't seem like it. That's our girl. He pulled her close, mindful of their audience. Our wise, frog-loving, prayer-answering girl. As if summoned, Emily appeared, dragging them toward where Mr. Sullivan was tuning up for another song. "Come dance, mister. Henderson's going to call a reel." The afternoon spun by in a blur of music and movement. Clara learned to square dance. Badly, but enthusiastically. Sam proved surprisingly graceful for such a large man. Emily darted between the adults like a butterfly, her joy infectious. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the guests gradually departed with good wishes and knowing smiles. Soon, it was just the three of them, standing in their yard amid the remnants of the celebration. "Should we clean up?" Clara asked, surveying the controlled chaos. "Tomorrow," Sam said firmly. "Tonight, we just be—" They settled on the porch as had become their custom, but now Clara sat beside Sam on the bench, his arm around her shoulders, while Emily sprawled at their feet. The evening was mild, the storm's fury a distant memory. "Tell the story," Emily requested, "about how you came to us." "You know the story," Clara laughed. "You lived it. But I like hearing it. Please." So Clara told it the frightening train ride, the wrong station that turned out to be right, the little girl who claimed her with absolute certainty. She told about learning to cook on the temperamental stove, about mending Josephine, about the storm that had tested them all. "And then what happened?" Emily prompted, though she knew perfectly well. "And then your papa came to Cedar Ridge and reminded me that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned. Sometimes they just happen, like getting off at the wrong station." "The right station," Sam corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Definitely the right station." Emily yawned hugely. "I'm glad God mixed up his trains. Otherwise, we'd still be sad, and you'd be married to that Morrison man, and nobody would be happy." "Time for bed, little philosopher," Sam said, scooping up his daughter. "Even answered prayers need their sleep." Clara followed them inside, pausing at the threshold to look back at the prairie stretching endlessly under the stars. Somewhere out there was the life she'd originally planned safe, predictable, empty. Here was the life she'd found challenging, uncertain, full to bursting with love. After Emily was tucked in with Josephine, after the lamps were dimmed and the house settled into quiet, Clara found herself in Sam's arms, dancing slowly in their bedroom to music only they could hear. "How did we get so lucky?" Sam murmured against her hair. "Emily would say it wasn't luck," Clara replied. "She'd say it was answered prayers." "And you, what would you say?" Clara pulled back to meet his eyes, seeing in them her whole future years of sunrises and storms, of teaching Emily and loving Sam, of building something strong and true on this unforgiving land. "I'd say," she whispered, "that sometimes you have to get off at the wrong station to find where you truly belong." Sam's smile was answer enough. Outside, the wind sang through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Inside, a family that had found each other against all odds settled in for their first night of their official forever. The mail-order bride who'd stepped off at the wrong station had finally, truly, come home. And in a small bed down the hall, a little girl smiled in her sleep, clutching a mended doll, secure in the knowledge that God did indeed answer prayers sometimes in the most unexpected ways. The house that had once echoed with loneliness now hummed with contentment. The prairie that had seemed so foreign now felt like an old friend. And Clara Evans, now Clara Carter, knew with bone-deep certainty that every twist of fate, every apparent mistake, had been leading her here. To this house, to this man, to this child, to this life she hadn't known she was looking for until she found it. As sleep finally claimed them, the last sound was Emily's voice, drifting from her room, Thank you, God, for sending her to the wrong station. Amen. And in the master bedroom, two hearts beat as one. Proof that love could bloom even in the harshest soil. That families could be made from more than blood. And that sometimes, just sometimes, getting off at the wrong station was the best mistake a person could make. The stars wheeled overhead. The prairie stretched endless and free. And in a modest ranch house in Wyoming, a family slept peacefully, bound together by choice, by chance, and by the unshakable belief of a little girl who'd known from the very beginning that Clara Evans belonged with them. Forever and always, at the wrong station. Thank you so much for listening to this heartwarming story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts about Clara, Sam, and little Emily's journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Give this video a like. And don't forget to hit the hype button so more people can discover this tale of love found at the wrong station. Your support helps bring more of these beautiful stories to life. Until next time, keep believing in unexpected blessings.